You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hey, everybody. Hope you're having a great day. This is Doug Thorpe, and this is another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I'm really excited about my guest today. He's a gentleman who I was introduced to through a networking connection. Prior guest on my show, Doug Crow. Shout out to Doug if you're listening. My guest is a gentleman named James Wang. James, welcome to the show.
Hey, Doug, nice to be here, and thanks for having me.
And James is a gentleman who has spent much of his career in the private equity realm. And I'm excited to bring that discussion here because private equity does play a role for businesses who may be looking to expand, grow, or acquire. There's always that opportunity, or for those who might be wanting exits, there's certainly a play there to get properly aligned with private equity rep to, help you in that part of the journey. But James, let's kind of dive right in. First, if I may, in your background, you were a graduate of West Point, did some active duty, I'm assuming. And what happened after that?
Yeah. There's a lot of years that I could pack into 5.5 years. And I typically say that. They go, well, that's kind of a conundrum. I go, no, in 5.5 years post graduating from West Point, it seemed like a lifetime. And it was in a very good way. If I had my druthers, I'd probably still be in the service. But there's this, little gal that turned into my wife of 28 years that kind of said, you're either going to stay in the military without me, or you're going to come out of the military with me. And look,
been there, done that.
Yeah. So that was, that was 28 years ago, and we courted 5 years in advance of that. So 33 years, and like I'm hitting my mid 50s, but I can tell you I've matured because of those 33 years. But leaving the military, that's where all the discipline and that's where a lot of what I would call common sense came from. And you kind of go, well, how do you get a lot of common sense in the military? I go, it's really about how to deal with people and how to deal with others. It's that influence of leadership. You don't have to be an officer like myself, but I too, as an officer, was kind of a lower level person. I was an 03 when I matriculated out. That's a captain in the military. I was a military intelligence officer. I was in the Foreign Areas Office, but I learned a lot of discipline. I understood learning together and working together as a family, right? Family of team members, brothers and sisters locked in arms. And that's kind of carried me through the technology space, because the other edict that my wife matured me on is I had the opportunity to go finance when I exited the military, or I could have gone technology. So finance, I was going to be an investment banker. I was going to go to Goldman Sachs. And my wife, who was in finance, said, you go that route, that's just as bad as being in the military. And for anyone that's in finance, I apologize. My daughter's in finance right now. And boy, they work long, hard hours. And I just have so much respect for them. And I also now realized, because of my daughter and because of some of the investment bankers that I've dealt with, that I have the utmost respect for them. I mean, they put in 16, 18, 20-hour days without just any type of angst, because they'll do it over and over again, because that's part of their DNA. And I just, I salute to them. But I took the tech route, and I've been in tech for, both in private equity as well as in big blue chip for over 20 years.
And how did you evolve into the private equity world?
Yeah. So good question. I had a couple of stops in blue chip. I worked at EMC before they became Dell. I was there when we acquired VMware. So we had a lot of good high five days. This is when the stock was doing well, the company was doing well. I had the opportunity to come to Dallas, Texas, to do work with HP, with Mark Hurd, when EDS was acquired. So part of that nuance was integrating with HP, EDS, and there were some other acquisitions like 3PAR along the way. It was just a great opportunity with a great culture inside of HP. and I was able to be in various leadership type roles. By the time that HP kind of ran its course, everyone probably have heard Mark exiting, and God rest his soul, Mark is now passed. But we had some nuances of board intervention and board issues. So senior leaders like myself had distinct opportunities to be picked up by private equity to run smaller businesses. I call it the other people's money's investment, right? They do aggregate other people's investors' money, but that OPM or other people's money is invested into great companies that are small, medium-sized businesses that are there to scale, grow, show profit, and ultimately turn into someone else's acquisitions or someone else's investment. And that's what private equity does. And I've been very fortunate to be in that stint for close to 15, almost 2 decades now.
Great, great. Well, over that journey and having that experience of a lot of the merger and acquisition activity, as did I in the banking world. I was with, as many of my listeners know, the old Texas Commerce, and we went through a couple of mergers. And you experience the joys and the disappointments and everything in between. There are many issues we could probably talk about, but I guess in respect to the role of leadership in making those transactions work, talk to us a little bit about your observations and maybe if we could call it best practices for those who are in leadership of the surviving entity.
Yeah.
What did they do to make it the best it could be?
Yeah. So Doug, that's kind of boy, we can make volumes and different sessions with that question. But one of the biggest elements that I see with small, medium business operators, and look, I've been involved in 3 different what's called platform companies. So these are private equity, they invest directly into those companies, and those companies then start buying or doing M&A, tucking in, et cetera. And they'll even do divestitures. So that there might be a core division that just doesn't fit anymore with the growth trajectory of that business. I've been fortunate or I've been cursed, whichever way you want to say that, doing 20 of those M&A tuck-ins, integrations, or divestitures. And look, it's a great opportunity to go acquire a business. It's a great opportunity to integrate the business, and it's even a better opportunity once kind of that change, as Cotter would call it, John Cotter would call it, right? As that change management happens, what I really love is what kind of grows on the other side. So I think as a leader, one of the biggest aspects is having a vision, right? And I don't mean to say vision of pontification, right? Vision of reality, right? What does that vision of reality really mean? We always talk about having a SMART goal, a specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound goal. Well, if you have a SMART goal that you place upon your leadership team or your individuals that work and operate with you, why wouldn't you have a SMART goal for yourself? And that SMART goal is really kind of contemplating a vision. Where am I going to be 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? If you're a $1 business today, as an example, and you say, I'm going to be a $1 billion business in 5 years, I know that I may be creating some consternation out there. I think it's great to have vision, but you got to be realistic, right? And with that realism is, if I said I have $1 today and I want to be $100 million, there's no vision that I'm going to knock and say that's not realistic. But the next thing that I'm going to say is, okay, then how? Okay, then from how, then what is it, right? So it's really kind of saying what's the process and what's the priority, and then how do you now create that mapping to create that vision? So the first step in that process or that leg in journey is, what does that vision look like? And I've always had a vision of any acquisition that we would make as a leadership team, what would the other side look like? And I know that's a short-term vision for many, but integrations take 1, 2, sometimes even 3 years plus. So you've got to have this 1, 2, or 3 year journey and a vision that's associated with that to say, number one, my vision might be the $2 two companies combined together and we have minimal turnover because of angst or change management. Number two might be a vision that states that we're going to start now integrating processes where it makes sense and taking out some of the employee pains that they have today. And then vision number three might be once that's done, then we're going to launch at least 3 new products that double the revenue business of that integrated partnership. And I know that those may look like very short-term tactical, but you got to have that vision of what it looks like and then work backwards to
All backwards, yeah.
to solve that, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's the first pillar. The second pillar is I think you've got to have discipline. And this is where my military, I kind of go back to those days of saying, boy, if I didn't wake up at 05:15, where would I be? But 05:15 wasn't because they wanted to punish us, even though I still believe that. I think part of it is discipline, right? Discipline to say, are you going to make your bed if that's the one thing that you do? I think that was a University of Texas graduation speech from an admiral, right? Well, if you're going to make your bed every single day, or if you're going to wake up at 5:15 in the morning, are you going to return emails in 24-hour time periods? Are you going to address people when they need to be addressed? Are you going to have critical and crucial conversations when you need to do that, right? The whole spectrum is there, but are you disciplined to make those things happen day in, day out, right? To get to that vision to happen, right? So vision, then discipline. And really, the last element of this is you can't do it yourself. You've got to have influence, right? And that influence is really centered on your leadership. And I call it our leadership. It's not just the culture of how we operate, but it's holding people accountable, being responsive. In my company today at OnePath, we have what's called 4 core values. And I know it's high level, but we have integrity, excellence, accountability, and teamwork. And if you think about I eat as the acronyms, we have a saying, hey, what do you eat? I eat integrity, excellence, accountability, teamwork. And then from there, well, how do you define integrity? Well, do things when no one's watching, still do it right. Excellence, do it in the best capable manner of my God-given capabilities, right? Accountability. Well, accountability is when I say I'm going to do it, I get it done, and I get my team, which kind of rolls into teamwork, which means how do I set up my team player for success? This is a little bit of humility, but this is the core values that we operate. And once you have that influence, that leadership, I think that's when it kind of congeals everything together.
Yeah. I like that. And, to unpack that a little bit, the notion of having that vision, I think, is so critical. In fact, I was just in an earlier coaching session this morning with an executive, and we were talking about the vision. One of the immediate benefits of a leader having a vision on what they want to do, how they want to get there, et cetera, it gives you a foundation of certainty that day by day, as the curveballs get thrown at you, which business does, you can respond rather than react. You can respond based on what you claim your vision to be. You can look at something and say, let's see, does this propel the vision or does it hinder the vision? How do I want to respond? If it's a quick decision that has to be made, it becomes a relatively simple yes or no. Yes, it propels the vision, or no, it hinders it. We're not going to do that, and it eliminates a lot of the uncertainty and helps to build a clarity message that everybody can gravitate toward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I think the first question, Doug, you mentioned is, when I go into these private equity firms and I take over a business because I'm kind of the operating CEO, those are the 3 ingredients that I see right off the bat. And this is not a knock on anyone building their business, but sometimes businesses lack that vision or that clarity of vision. Sometimes those businesses lack discipline and having those crucial, critical decisions and conversations to be had. And last but not least, it's the leadership, it's the influence, right? And I always have this saying to my kids, how do you show up today, right? How are you showing up today? And how do you want to show up today? Those are all 3 different scenarios, right?
Absolutely. And that is it is a simple and seemingly common sense question. How do you want to show up today?
Yeah, that's right.
And if you think about it, that ties back to a personal vision. If I'm going to be a leader of an organization, what's my personal vision of the leader I want to be? And have I done that work to frame that up? I might be a genius about business matters, and I might be able to map this great vision board and project plan and change management program, all of that. But if I've failed to decide on the leader I want to be while all of that is happening, that's a really critical element that must get addressed.
Yeah. And Doug, I know we talked very briefly before we started the podcast on this, but that leadership, if I double clicked into that, that's taken a journey for me, right? From my days as a young second lieutenant, first lieutenant, and captain to where I sit today as a CEO for multiple different private equity backed businesses. I will tell you, at first it was more of, okay, what can I do as a servant leader, right? What can I do for my team? What can I do for this? How do I put them on a pedestal, right? And others might be transformational or transactional leaders, and those are okay. Some might even take on the word charisma or charismatic based leadership, and that's okay. I don't think there's actually a style or a difference, and I'm certainly not here to judge one is better than the other. But for me, what I've taken on is I went from being that transformational leader, so I thought, but on a journey where today I sit, with three legs of the stool. And I think number one is you've got to have balance with some elements of what I call operations or operational efficiency. Probably ties in with financial acuteness, awareness, operational efficiency, sales and go to market, and even product development. But I call it the operational, the business aspect. As a leader, you've got to have competencies in some of the primary factors in that. I think you also have to have balance in your personal life. I sit on boards where I've seen other board members or other CEOs incredibly successful. And I'm talking nine-figure plus exits, right? In their lifetime. Some eclipsing even greater than that, right? But they're on their fourth marriages, or they have a marriage that just doesn't work. And I'm not saying that marriage is for everyone, but I just really talk about that personal balance, right? And really kind of the third element for me is I've been on this journey where I talk about spirituality, right? And I'm not saying you got to have the bumper sticker, or you got to be the guy or gal that's touting it and having the Bible with you, but there's a basis for core values. Where's that basis coming from? And for me personally, that comes from the truth, which is, for me, the truth is the Bible. And I know that this may create consternation for some of my secular audience members and yours, but for me, in my personal leadership style, it's taken on a huge journey. From servant leader to transformational leader to what I would call today kind of a balanced leader. And I don't know if there's a terminology for that, but it's balancing my personal life, my business life, and my spiritual life, and coming together. And those three legs of the stool, so to speak, I've seen those three-legged stools. One side's a little bit shorter, then you start teetering. If it's really too short, then you start falling over. And that's the analogy that I would love to kind of convey to others that are on this call.
I like that a lot, and I think that's really synonymous. And maybe you and I can work on crafting that term and trademarking it or something. But what I tell people, and certainly all of my coaching clients, I've abandoned the old popular phrase "work-life balance." I always felt that there was a bit of a struggle with that term, and I won't go too deep in that. But what I've replaced it with is the concept of work-life harmony. And even expanding it to your three-legged stool idea, which I do like because of that operational element of it. I think there's a notion of a harmony among those three, and just like a great orchestra, you've got sections of the orchestra. You got the strings, the horns, the percussion, and woodwinds and such, and A good conductor knows how to bring all that together in a kind of a harmony that makes the right sound. And I think leaders need to think about harmonizing those elements of their life. And I agree with you. There's the notion of striving for a balance there in terms of equal distribution or equal effectiveness in those things. And I frequently there's an old tried and true trick that coaches have. There's a wheel of life diagram, and I've heard it described a lot of different ways. But it's there's like maybe 8 segments you can define.
That's right.
For what you're doing, and you score from 0 to 10, going outer band on the concentric circles of where you stand in each of those quadrants or sections of your life. And just like a bicycle wheel, if you smash your bike into a curb and you dent the rim, well, the rest of your ride is going to be a ka-thunk, 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 and our circle of life can be that way. We short circuit one aspect and one element, and inevitably our lives are going to come around to that place.
That's right.
And you've got this bumpy ride you're on, and you wonder why you feel tired, sore, and fatigued. Well, you got to round out that circle.
That's absolutely correct. And look, I think the wheel of life, or the balance wheel, that I would like to kind of utilize that acronym. But I will say, for leaders that don't have the balance, it's kind of like, now you're using the analogy of having a balloon that's kind of horizontal. If you start squeezing one, because that's not where that's all your focus, or maybe that's not where you're focused, but if you can just kind of visualize, well, if you've got kind of constant air and that's your life, and if you squeeze on one end, you're going to elongate the other
blow
end.
out the other. Yeah.
And the whole thing is, if you squeeze on 2, all of the air gets compressed into this, and you're going to have a blowout, right? So the whole idea is, how do you balance that air across all segments of that horizontal balloon, right? And I urge, I know we're talking very high level, but leadership with common sense is, for those that are spiritual believers on this call, I think, especially here in Texas, Doug, I think you and I, both men of faith, I can say, number one, God doesn't want you to fail, but you got to do your part, right? And so the spiritual aspect is great. But on balance, now let's look at your business aspect. Where is it that you have deficiencies? Be really real to you, right? To yourself. Can you read a P&L? If you can't read it, then what should you do to go about it, right? And if you have that P&L, what's the first thing that you should ask your controller, CFO, or others? If I asked a person, hey, how do you do management discussion and analysis, or financial planning and analytics, FP&A? What does that really mean? Well, what is my balance sheet, and what does my cash flow statement, and what does my P&L statement really mean? I'm not saying that this is all going to be financial, but that's got to mean something to you as a leader. Now let's talk operationally. What are your KPIs? What are you focused in on, the 5 to 7 measurements every single day, every single week, right? If you don't know, or if it varies, then your teams are going to vary. So what are the consistent KPIs that you have? And I think the third aspect of that is, what's your framework? And I'm not advocating, everyone talks about EOS or Rockefeller principles or OKRs or other. I don't care. What's your framework, right? How do you stay disciplined to now focus on the KPIs and the measurements that matter, and then creating a vision for where we're going, and looking at the milestones or the priorities, and some people call it rocks if you follow EOS, right? To say, what are those things that's going to now abide by you and get closer and closer to that vision? I think those things have to be there.
And the other thought that comes to my mind as you describe all that, I think the other key element for leaders is consistency, because all of those programs you named, they're all out there. And I agree with you. I don't fundamentally care. I'm agnostic to which one you pick, but the challenge is, pick one and go with it and be consistent, because I have seen a lot of entrepreneurs that have built nice businesses, not necessarily great businesses, but they're not great because the leader has not been consistent. It's bright, shiny object chasing. It's like, oh, I read a new book. Let's do that. Or I heard about a new plan. Let's do that. Or my mastermind taught me a new thing. Let's do that. And you're constantly shifting gears. And the watchword that I challenge leaders to be as sensitive to in respect to your employees, a confused mind says no. If your employees are confused about what the priority of the day is or the general direction of where they need to go next, if they don't know what a win looks like, they're not going to do something wrong. They're just not going to do much of anything because they're afraid of doing the wrong thing. And if they don't know what the right thing is, they're not going to do it.
Doug, I couldn't agree with you more. So it's kind of funny. I actually wrote a book this past year with the help of Doug Crow, and who you mentioned, and it's out there on Amazon. I can tell you, it's not money making. I have a free edition, so I will only plug this in on your show to say it's free for everyone that wants to go there, right? Not the paperback or the hardback, but the Kindle version. So it's James Wang, Hwang, Next Generational Leadership, Dare to Fail, right? And when you look at Dare to Fail, it was every mistake that I made in my 25 years. Let me tell you what I learned from it, right? And this is my hope and prayer for you, which is don't make the same mistake that I did, right? And one of them is I call it all these mistakes that I've made is called Wangisms, right? So Wangism, I think number 3 or number 4 is repeat something 7 times 4 different ways. Why? Because your employees and your team members, they don't want to be confused. In fact, to the point that you've almost got them on boredom, which is, James, I know you said that. That's when you got it, right? Because you've got to be able to have the same message on point over and over and disciplined in a statistically and in a sanely manner that's disciplined over and over in a consistent way. 7 times 4 different ways. You might even do it 10 times. You might even do it 20 times. But when your employee or your team member says, I got this, you don't have to tell me again, right? That's when you know you got it.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I see that play out in so many ways. And I had one coaching client I was talking to, and he said, we were talking about leaders he admires and what are their attributes, what do they demonstrate? And he said, in my world, what I see, the most highly respected leaders, they repeat themselves all the time. And I said, yeah. And how often does it vary? And he said, they don't. That's the point. They sound like broken records. I go, yeah, but does it produce results? He said, oh, yeah. He said, no doubt about it. And I said, well, there's something to that you need to think about.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, James, I know we're about up on time here, my friend. Thank you so much for sitting in. What is the best way people can reach out and get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more?
Yeah. So look, I asked him to come to my LinkedIn pages, and I think I'm probably violating a rule somewhere because I've got 2 LinkedIn profiles. I've got one that is my secular, we'll call it the secular profile, but it's James Hwang, and the notion of private equity operating executive. I am on several boards, but I'm also running a business called One Path Today based out of Atlanta, Georgia. My other profile is in what I call my part-time gig, but it's really my full-time attention. It's James Wang, but it's for C12, and it's got a C12 for those that don't know that are listening to you. C12 is a peer advisory group that is faith-based, and for me, it's not Bible study. It's really all on business, but it's all on spiritual values, right? So why are we doing what we're doing? How can we do better? And what are we learning from this? And then we're now integrating that with leadership. So everything that we just talked about, from balance wheel to being on balance, business, spiritual, and personal. That is something that is very near and dear to me in my heart. So call that my passion project and call it my daytime project. But either way, please link in with me. And if you can, please go to the Amazon bookstore and you can download the free Kindle version of my book, Dare to Fail, James Wang, Hwang.
That's great. One last time, James, thanks so much for sitting in. I really appreciate you contributing and sharing with us. And folks, on that note, we're going to sign off, say goodbye. But before we do, I want to remind you, we've got a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, leave us a comment, let us know what you think, and if you've got any recommendations for other topics or guests. But again, with that, I'm going to sign off, say goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.